Hello my viewers and welcome back to my channel. Now in this video we take a look at a palm color woman's video which has sparked a lot of outrage on social media. Now I have posted a video already where my fellow black brothers and sisters are reacting to her video, but in this video her own community is stepping forward, setting records straight and schooling her on her own complicity in systemic racism. Now, this is after an attempt to rewrite history, absolve palm color women of their role in systemic racism. But the truth tells us a different story. Palm color women were complicit in slavery, benefiting from its injustices and perpetuating racism. They didn't stand alongside black women. Instead, they contributed to their oppression. Now, she says, we were in this together. But just like one of her own says, no, you were not, because if you were, you wouldn't have stopped when you got yours. So with that said, let's check out their videos as her own community schools her. I will be right back.
Dear Black women, so I did a video yesterday addressing specifically Black women. I just wanted to see how long my video would last before being taken down for violating community standards. Didn't take long. So, as a woman, we have blazed these trails together. We did this together. We need to stand together. Women, to include black women, got the right to vote after men. They're still leading the race. It's still not equal. Equality, equal pay. We still get less on the dollar. So why are you alienating a high percentage of allies? Like, why are you doing this? Separation will lead nowhere, and in the real world, aside from TikTok, we have to bargain together. We have to do this together. Why are you alienating? And what constitutes white? This is 2024, and most of us are blended. My family is blended. You know, I have cousins that are married to beautiful black women or even black men. So there's a lot of mixed in my family. So if it's just a black pack, like, where do you draw the line? Only certain black people? Because I have 2% Nigerian. Am I allowed in? I think we all should be allowed in because we're women. And this is our battle together. I don't know if you noticed, but the world is still being run by men. Men that love war and that love keeping us divided. So why would you want to divide yourselves? Women had nothing to do with slavery. Literally. Like nothing. I'm sure we were saying, hey babe, this is pretty effed up because we're nurturing, we're loving, it's wrong. That was men. So why this hate on white women? What has a white woman? Because we're somewhat married to white men? My husband's not a racist or... we're Gen X. Like, we grew up together. I went to school. I learned so much from the black culture because of desegregation, and I loved it. Rockin' a robin all night long, puffin' a puffin', and we're doing the double dutch. Like, I loved it. And we were friends, so I don't know what happened and why there's this divide, and especially when we all need each other. Can someone let me know what's going on and what changed to all the hate on white women? Because I would certainly like to know what happened. Because I don't feel like we all have friends that are diverse. So do you think there's some little pocket of, you know, a place where we're not all interacting, engaging? In the neighborhood, it's diverse. So what happened to where there's black pack, hate against white women. I don't know what happened. Why are you guys mad at white women? Seriously, I just want to know. My friends didn't get the memo. I have a beautiful friend that has a doctorate. It's tons. I have every ethnicity of friends. I don't know if they get the memo because we still love each other. So I don't know. Are these educated? Black pack? Like what? I don't know. Someone let me know. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Dear black women, I'm sorry. Let me call this one in. Hold on. Girl, you are in... What are you doing right now? Okay, listen. White women, just all across the board, are terrible allies. Period. And we did not forge these things together, these milestones. We did not forge them together. And that's very easy to prove. Look at when black women got the right to vote versus when white women got the right to vote. In all of these cases of liberation, it was always racist. It was always white women. If you look at the pictures, look at those old pictures of the suffragettes. There weren't black women in those pictures. It was white women's movement. They didn't care about the black women. And to this day, black women are paid less. They're disrespected the most. They're like, people feel entitled to them, their time, all of this, which is literally what you're doing right now. You think you're entitled to their time, their space, all of that. And you're not. You're just literally not. And if you want to be an ally that you claim to be, then you need to just shut up. Just shut up and listen to what they're saying. That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. Follow their lead. It's not that hard. It isn't. But get off your high horse and understand that there are spaces that you are not welcome. And it's historically to protect themselves. So, anyway, peace. I'm sorry, black women. I'm sorry you have to put up with this shit.
Ma'am, I'm gonna need you to stop right there. You got flack for your last video, and rightfully so. And you're gonna get flack for this one, and rightfully so. You did nothing together. They succeeded in spite of you. Hell, you couldn't even share a bathroom until 1964. While it is true that some African American suffragists in the North were able to vote with the 19th Amendment, the reality is that the majority of black women could not. Oftentimes the tactics of literary tests, poll taxes, voter ID requirements, intimidation, and threats were used against the entirety of the black community, as well as the Latin community, the Asian community, and basically anybody who wasn't a Meo sapien. It wasn't until 1965, thanks to the work of women like Fannie Lou Hamer and Diane Nash, that the Voting Rights Act was passed. And it applied to everyone. See, had you been in it together, y'all wouldn't have stopped when you got yours. But that's exactly what you did. You stopped when you got yours. No, what people need to do, right? Seriously, stop talking, right? And listen to other people's experiences. Listen to all of them. I promise you. They are not the same as yours. You don't have the right to speak for them.
Shut up. Are you filming a TikTok while you're driving? Anyways, I'm going to address a couple of your points. Number one, about black women and how they feel about black men getting the right to vote before. You can thank white suffragettes for that, because white suffragettes did not think black women should have the right to vote because they were beneath them. Next, to your other point about how white women didn't participate in slavery. What? They were not silent bystanders, not in the slightest. They were absolutely complicit and enjoyed the status that created for them. So much so that mistresses wrote manuals to pass on to their daughters to teach them how they could manage their slaves when they got passed down to them, inevitably. And if you think I'm lying, you can look up Madame Delphine LaLaurie. As per the rest of your TikTok, the things you're about can either be attributed to white women's direct complicity or inaction. So you say, look at how many men are running things. I counter to you, how many of our politicians are BIPOC? Who's raising those white men politicians that are running things? Black women owe us nothing. Nothing at all. They don't owe us our help. They don't owe us their labor. They don't owe us camaraderie. And you are at too big an olden age to be feigning ignorance. It's tired. Okay? Do better.
Sibling, the patience it took to make it through your video without losing my last net was serious. Go look up the Casual Act. Go watch Race to Dinner. Or Race for Dinner, whichever it is. Go read Hood Feminism. Go read an Indigenous people's history of the United States, and a Black woman's history of the United States, and an Indigenous Black history of the United States. Because the level of ignorance that you have towards what other people go through is staggering. Staggering, white woman. The only time y'all want to be an ally, like on big scale, is when something actually touches you. When it actually finally touches you. And Black women didn't get the vote the same time white women did. Indigenous people just got to be able to practice their ceremony and be seen in public in groups of more than 2 in the 1970s. And you wonder why we're a little leery? Seriously, go look at Casual. I'll wait. And while you're at it, go look up Manifest Destiny, Indians Save the Man, boarding schools, now the foster care system. Are you effing kidding me? There are birth alerts for Native American women across all of Turtle Island. When we have a baby, the government knows and they come and take it half the time. So don't act like you know what kind of suffering people other than people in a lower, more marginalized status than white women, because it's finally touching you and you might have your rights taken away. I'm beyond not sorry. My rights are all gone. I'm an Indigenous disabled U.S. Navy combat veteran in my car right now because I can't afford a hotel room for my caregiver to have surgery. We live in trailer houses, manufactured home in a trailer house, and right now they're trying to kick us out trailer house because that's just too much to look at. Our poor decrepites are just too much to look at. Don't come to me about why we aren't your allies or why we don't trust you to be an ally, because I've gone far and far and far to try to trust you white women as allyship, and you have proved me wrong I can hold one hand up to count the amount of white human beings on this planet who have stood in the fire with me. Not when it's comfortable. No. When you have to sacrifice something. I have tattooed on my body. For those I love, I will sacrifice. What do you do?
Black women don't want to work with us because you and other white women like you are lumping the struggles of a white woman and the struggles of a black woman together and saying, look, they're the same.
Now, I want us to look at the women's suffrage movement. We will look at the 19th Amendment, which prohibited the denial of voting rights on the basis of gender. Now, what's not often acknowledged in classroom textbooks and curriculum is the reality that not all women gained the right to vote. Now, while the previously ratified 15th Amendment prohibited federal and state governments from denying the right to vote based on color, race, or previous servitude, nothing in the U.S. Constitution and no federal laws explicitly prohibited discrimination on the basis of color, race, and gender. Thus, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and other women and men of color did not see their voting rights ensured until the 1964 Civil Rights and 1965 Voting Rights Acts, more than 40 years later. Now, on August 18th, 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified. The amendment stated that the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of gender. Even though Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and other women of color played a significant role in ratification of the 19th Amendment, the language of the amendment did not explicitly protect their voting rights on the basis of their race. So while monumental, the amendment only protected the voting rights of palm color women. For example, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, a Black woman, spent her whole life advocating for abolitionism and women's rights and made a call to action to the suffragists at the National Women's Rights Convention in 1866, urging them to include Black women in their fight. Now, while voting discrimination was prohibited on the basis of gender, loopholes in the system allowed for voting obstacles, including poor taxes and literacy tests, intimidation tactics, the denial of citizenship because of the ancestry or immigrant status, and other art-to-the-cyst strategies. Now, these tactics were used by palm color Americans to prevent Black, Indigenous, and people of color from voting. Now, the women's suffrage movement was inspired by indigenous civilizations in which women often held leadership positions, inside and outside the home. Additionally, the women's suffrage movement had its roots in the abolitionist movement. Initially, women, free people of color, and enslaved people bonded over a mutual desire for suffrage. Women were often invited to speak at abolitionist group meetings, allowing them to utilize their platforms to call for change. Now, Frederick Douglass, an abolitionist and reformer, was one of the 31 men and the only African American present to sign the Declaration of Sentiments at the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention in 1848. He also established the American Equal Rights Association alongside Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, advocating for universal voting rights. While the 15th Amendment prevented the U.S. government and states from denying citizens the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude, it did not exclude gender as a protected category. Now, a deep divide in the suffrage movement emerged and expanded, recognizing that the South was still recovering from their loss in the war, grappling with a future without slavery, and a lack of support within the U.S. Congress for universal suffrage. Some Black suffragists, including Frederick Douglass and Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, advocated for the endorsement of the 15th Amendment as it was written. Now, many palm color leaders within the women's suffrage movement felt betrayed, and their reactions exposed their articism and elitism. Now, the suffragists shifted their focus to single-mindedly pursuing voting rights for palm color women, leveraging their power and privilege. They made a conscious decision to exclude Black and people of color women from their movement. Now, the women's suffrage movement typically relied on peaceful tactics such as lobbying, parading, and petitioning. Nonetheless, the women were not strangers to violence. In 1913, members of the National American Women's Suffrage Association were attacked by spectators as they participated in a suffrage parade in Washington, D.C., after decades of campaigning peacefully, yet making little progress and facing violent responses. Now, the suffragists adjusted their strategy to one that embraced firmer methods. Now, as part of their new methods, women began picketing at the White House. In one instance, in 1917, 33 women members of the National Women's Party up to 73 years old were arrested and tortured while protesting outside the White House. In retaliation, women participated in hunger strikes while imprisoned, leading to more violence as authorities retaliated with forced feedings. Now, these outcomes were seen not just in DC, but across the nation as more and more women united, demonstrated, and picketed. They were met with more resistance and violence from authorities and spectators. Now, it is important to discuss, learn, and unlearn the history of the women's suffrage movement. It is also important to discuss and acknowledge the injustices that continue to exist within the system following the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Black, Indigenous, and people of color women continued to challenge the systems in place for decades after and continue to do so today. Now, while Black and people of color were left behind by the 19th Amendment, the movements for universal suffrage and equal rights continued. Black people continued to fight for their rights well into the 1960s. However, injustices persist today because palm color supremacist institutions continue to allow articism and discrimination to prevail. The Equal Rights Amendment, ERA, initially introduced in 1923 during the women's suffrage movement, states equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of gender. Now, the ERA regained momentum during the 1960s and 1970s, following the success of the civil rights movement. Pro-ERA groups lobbied, petitioned, and demonstrated, revisiting suffragist tactics from the 1920s in order to meet the deadline for states to ratify the amendment, 1979. While the amendment deadline was extended to 1982, it did not receive sufficient votes and was not ratified. Now, the ERA was subsequently introduced to Congress every year since. It was not until January of this 2020 that Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the amendment. It is now up to Congress to remove the original deadline and push the amendment forward. Even if the ERA successfully gets ratified by Congress, injustices continue to prevent Black and people of color women from exercising their right to vote. Voter ID laws, voter registration limitations, voter pages, felony disenfranchisement when the incarceration rates are extremely disproportionate across races. Limited early voting dates and locations are just some of the tactics in place to block voting rights. As the fight for equality and equity continue, the idea of intersectionality has gained momentum as a call to action for current movements to reframe what and who they are advocating for. Originally coined by scholar Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989, intersectionality refers to the overlap or intersection of race, class, gender, and other individual characteristics. When movements recognize intersectionality, they become more inclusive and more effective. Imagine had women's suffrage movement leaders such as Susan B. Anthony relinquished their artist ideas and advocated for those who look different from them. All women and men may have actually secured the right to vote 100 years ago. But hell no, once they had theirs, they had to stop. We have finally come to the end of the video, but what do my viewers have to say? Share your thoughts as well in the comment section. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video as I bring you another interesting video.